Conflict and Compromise, the NHL's Players Association. While the NHL is celebrating its 100th year anniversary, the NHL Players Association only turned 60 this year. The story of the NHLPA is full of drama, turmoil, conflict, and compromise. The players won great victories and suffered some big losses. The NHL Players Association can trace its roots to 1955, when the NHL head office selected 2 players and 3 league executives to be a part of a 5-member board called the NHL Pension Society. The 2 players were stars, winger Ted Lindsay of the Detroit Red Wings and Doug Harvey of the Montreal Canadiens. At the first pension meeting, and the others that followed, Harvey and Lindsay questioned the other members on certain details of the NHL players' pension plan, but they were ignored on every occasion. Players' pensions seemed to be one big secret, with no real paperwork to be found. This conflict of withholding information from the players was the catalyst of the union's formation. In 1956, Ted Lindsay started meeting with Nelson Lewis and Milton Mound, 2 lawyers in New York who had secured some games for MLB players, about getting some rights for hockey players. During the 1956 All-Star Games, Ted Lindsay met with the players to discuss the union's formation in hopes to gain some rights for them. On February 12, 1957, Lindsay, lawyer Milton Mound, and representatives from 6 NHL teams held a press conference. Ted announced the formation of the National Hockey League Players Association. When asked if there was a union, all 6 players replied quickly, as one, "We are not a union." The owners did not see it this way. Jack Adams, the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings at this time, on learning of the information the Players Association, went to every player on the team and said, "Are you for this? Are you for this?" Only Lindsay would look him in the eyes. In October, the fledgling NHLPA filed an antitrust lawsuit against the NHL, alleging that it was a monopoly. In November, the Red Wings withdrew their support for the NHLPA. By early 1958, there wasn't much support among players trying to form an association. The union, born out of the conflict, had its first compromise. Lindsay and the lawyers agreed to settle the lawsuit against the NHL in exchange for a few concessions, including a $7,000 minimum salary, an increase in players' playoff pool, and payment of moving expenses for traded players. Nevertheless, today, many within the NHL players view Lindsay as a true founder of their union. He would pay the price, but eventually they were able to form a union. It took almost 10 years for the NHLPA to form again in 1967. The NHL players tried to organize a union again, and this time the league's owners agreed to recognize it as a legal entity. Eagleson, who was the agent for the phenom Bobby Orr, was named the NHLPA's first executive director. During his 25-year tenure as executive director, Eagleson negotiated 4 collective bargaining agreements without a lockout or a strike. The first one was in 1976, followed by successor agreements in 1981, 84, and 88. Eagleson had a very good relationship with owners. Many thought it was way too close. In 1991, a series of newspaper stories detailing years of corruption within the NHLPA forced Eagleson to resign. He would later be indicted on several counts of fraud. On New Year's Day, in 1992, agent Bob Goodenow replaces Eagleson as the union's executive director. By April, Goodenow led the players on a strike right before the playoffs in 1992, a strike that the players won. In 1992, the NHLPA was focused on getting the players their rights to their name and likeliness for licensing purposes, which began in April 1st and lasted 10 days. If we weren't able to get all the rights and controls over the likeliness of players, we wouldn't have been able to have the licensing revenues that gave us the strength to do all the things that we did, Goodenow said. The players won other rights as well, including in free agency and neutral arbitration. It was called the trading card strike, Goodenow said. In 1994, the league began making labor proposals to the NHLPA that included taxes and other mechanisms meant to control salary escalation. In other words, the owners wanted a salary cap. The players rejected the offer, causing the NHL's first lockout. It lasted from October 1st, 1994 to January 11th, 1995. The NHL played a 48-game season instead of a 84-game season in 1995. This conflict was ended by a compromise. The players and owners agreed to a collective bargaining agreement that did not include a cap on veteran salaries, but did include some control on entry-level players. The NHL and the NHLPA enjoyed a 10-year labor peace. In 2004, NHL hired a firm to produce a report on league finances. The report, which was paid for by the NHL, stated that the league was losing millions of dollars due to escalating player salaries. The NHL wanted a hard salary cap. The players rejected their offer and felt the report's findings were flawed because it was paid for by the NHL. The players prepared for another lockout. The lockout began September 16, 2004, and by February 16, 2005, the season was canceled. The players, along with NHLPA senior advisor Ted Saskin, negotiated a deal which included a hard salary cap for players and teams. Over the next 4 years, the union would have several internal conflicts, causing the firing of 2 executives. They were searching for a stable director. In 2010, they turned to Don Fehr, who had recently retired as a longtime executive director of the MLB Players Association. Just 2 years into his tenure, conflict would arise, and there would be need for a compromise, or the whole 2012-2013 season would be lost. In September of 2012, the league's collective bargaining agreement expired, and since the players and the owners could not reach a settlement, once again, another lockout began. They were able to reach a compromise with the players, giving up some of their revenue sharing, but keeping the length of their contracts. The season would begin in January with only 48 games. Today, the NHLPA not only represents the players in negotiations, but also requires all player agents to be certified through their training program, in an effort to ensure the agents are working on behalf of their clients. The NHLPA also has business affair divisions, which handles all merchandise and licensing agreements, as well as its charitable partnerships and international events. Each year, the Ted Lindsay Award is presented annually to the most outstanding player in the NHL for that season, as voted on by the members of the NHL Players Association. Originally called the Lester B. Pearson Award, after the Canadian Prime Minister and Nobel Prize winner. In 2009 and 2010 season, the Players Association changed the award's name to honor one of the game's great and union founders, Ted Lindsay. The current collective bargaining agreement runs out in September 2022, but both sides have options in 2019 to end things in 2020. Another conflict and compromise on the horizon?